It's the show that visited a galaxy far, far away, and all we brought back was this lousy t-shirt. It's episode 11 of World of Stew.
You want a podcast? Well, here's a podcast. You want a podcast? It's the World of Stew.
Hello and welcome once again to the World of Stew, your one-stop shop for all your podcast needs in relation to anything to do with the universe of geekdom. Now, after a couple of shows where we deviated from our planned trajectory and we had a couple of special episodes, we are back full circle to the third and final part of our horror movie trilogy. For those of you that don't remember, this is my look at my three favourite horror movie icons, the three guys that sit at the top of the tree. So far we have been to Springwood and survived an onslaught from Freddy Krueger. We then travelled to Camp Crystal Lake and barely escaped with our lives at the hands of Jason Voorhees. So where do we go for our third and final trip into the world of horrordom? Maybe this will give you a clue. Yes, indeed, it is the top dog himself, Haddonfield's blackest of sheep. It's Michael Myers. Now, Michael Myers doesn't really have a long, complicated backstory like our two previous entries, Krueger and Voorhees. In fact, his life is pretty simple. He was a seemingly ordinary boy until the Halloween night of 1963, where he took it upon himself to stab his teenage sister Judith to death. Following this event, he is hospitalized at the Smith's Grove Sanitarium, where he is treated by Dr. Samuel Loomis. Michael would be at Smith's Grove for 15 years, and I think it's over to the man himself, Mr. Donald Pleasance playing Samuel Loomis, to tell us just what the boy was all about.
I met him 15 years ago. I was told there was nothing left. No reason, no conscience, no understanding, and even the most rudimentary sense of life or death, of good or evil, right or wrong. I met this 6-year-old child with this blank, pale, emotionless face and the blackest eyes, the devil's eyes. I spent 8 years trying to reach him, and then another 7 trying to keep him locked up, because I realized that what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely and simply evil.
15 years after being thrown into the nut house, Michael instigates a mass breakout of Smith Grove patients, which allows him time to head back to his hometown of Haddonfield, Illinois. And that leads us nicely onto 1978 and John Carpenter's original Halloween. The film begins with the point of view of an undisclosed individual who happens to be looking through a window into a house as a teenage couple. The male leaves and the stalker enters the house, climbs the stairs and sneaks into the girl's bedroom. As he is sneaking up the stairs, he pulls a mask down over his face. Now this entire sequence is shot from the point of view of the antagonist who has snuck into the house, so we don't know who we're dealing with, and it is really a clever and unique way of doing things. The girl sees the stalker and refers to them by name, calling them Michael. In fact, she says something along the lines of, "Michael, what are you doing, Michael?" Michael then stabs the girl multiple times before exiting the house and sitting on the curb, where he is met by his returning parents who have been out for the night and left him in the care of his sister, who was clearly not taking much care of him at all. In fact, it could be argued that he took care of her. We skip forward 15 years and we meet Dr. Loomis, who is driving to Smith's Grove with a nurse. As they approach the gates, however, they notice that all the patients are roaming the grounds. Loomis gets out and rushes to see what is going on, which allows Michael to steal the car and use it to head for Haddonfield. Michael spends the remainder of the film stalking Laurie Strode, who's played, of course, by Scream Queen Jamie Lee Curtis, who tries to tell her friends that she's being followed by some nutter in a mask, and they just don't believe her and tell her she's being paranoid. Dr. Loomis, in the meantime, arrives in town and tries to convince the local law that Michael is back and needs to be captured. It's Halloween night, hence the title of the film, and Myers kills all of Laurie's friends, leaving her till last. He breaks into the house where she is babysitting and at the end appears to have her at his mercy, despite the fact that she's stabbed him in the eye with a coat hanger. Dr. Loomis arrives just in the nick of time, shoots Michael several times, sending him flying over a first floor balcony. When we see the ground, however, Michael is gone. Dun dun dun. What happened to Michael? We would have to wait 3 years to find out, as he returns in Halloween 2. The events of the film take place immediately after the end of the first film, and Michael is still in town, killing random people, until he can track down Laurie. I mean, let's be honest, he's nothing if not persistent. Dr. Loomis is still searching for him, whilst Laurie is taken to the hospital, where under sedation, she miraculously remembers being adopted by the Strodes and visiting a young boy at a mental institution. It's funny, really, what you can remember after being stalked by a crazed killer in a William Shatner mask, really. Michael makes it to the hospital, where he, of course, starts piling up bodies, whilst Loomis uncovers a connection between Michael and Sam Hain, which has got this kind of weird occult vibe going on. He also finds out that Laurie is really Michael's younger sister and concludes that this is why he wants her dead. There's no real explanation as to why he would want to kill his sister, other than, I guess, the fact that he is a complete whack job. Loomis saves Laurie at the hospital, but is stabbed by Michael. Laurie shoots out both of her brother's eyes, which is, again, in itself miraculous, because who knew she was such a good shot? But still, he comes forward. Laurie then escapes while Dr. Loomis apparently blows both himself and his former patient up. At the end of the film, we believe it's all over. And in fact, it did appear as though it would be over, because a year later, we got the much maligned, yet in my opinion, the very brave Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. Now, the reason why this is much maligned is because of the fact it has nothing to do with Michael Myers. See, the idea was that Halloween could become a franchise with different themes each year. Unfortunately, Mr. Myers was the albatross around the neck of the filmmakers that they just could not escape. Like I say, it was called Season of the Witch, and the plot of the film revolves around a demented owner of the Silver Shamrock Novelty Company, Connell Cochran, who plans to kill children on Halloween by way of his Halloween masks. The masks contain a chip which somehow are powered by stones that he's stolen from Stonehenge. The chips will be activated by the Silver Shamrock TV advertisement, and the mask will not only kill the wearer, but unleash lethal bugs to kill anyone nearby. Trying to stop Connell is Dr. Chalice, who is played by the awesome Tom Atkins, who almost succeeds but ultimately fails. Or does he? If you want to make sense of that, then watch the film and check out the ending. For me, not only was this film different, but it also gave us the unforgettable and incredibly eerie Happy Halloween song from the Silver Shamrock TV ad. If you've never heard the song, stay tuned to the end of this very episode, for I will be closing the show with that very ditty. Once Halloween 3 fell on its ass, we quickly reverted to type with Halloween 4, subtitled The Return of Michael Myers. It was released in 1988 and starred in her debut movie role none other than the one, the only, the new Queen of Scream, Danielle Harris. The film is set 10 years after Halloween 2, and because we're basically pretending Halloween 3 never happened, which is a theme that becomes concurrent with Halloween, but we'll cross that when we get to it. Michael is in a coma and is being transferred back to Smith's Grove. Even though he's in a coma, he overhears the orderlies mention that he has a niece, so he wakes up and kills them and heads once more for Haddonfield. Dr. Loomis gets wind of what's going on and sets off in hot pursuit. In Haddonfield, we learn that Laurie had a daughter but has since died, and the daughter, called Jamie, Danielle Harris, is living with a foster family where she is plagued by dreams about her uncle. Michael and Loomis get into town, and Mr. Myers promptly goes and kills almost the entire police force. He eventually tracks down Jamie, of course, who escapes with help from the ever-reliable doctor. It should be noted as well that before these events happen, Jamie has been to the Halloween costume shop and procured herself a Halloween costume, which is that of a clown, which is the exact same costume that Michael wore at the beginning of the first film. A lynch mob show up, and with the sheriff they leave to take Jamie to the next town. Michael, however, hasn't been stopped by the fire extinguisher to the face that he got just prior to the lynch mob driving off with Jamie, and he's actually hiding on the underside of their truck. Climbs into the truck, kills the men before Jamie's foster sister runs him over. Not that this is going to stop Michael, of course, because Michael is hardcore. He gets up, dusts himself off, only to be shot multiple times, which send him falling down a mine shaft, which obviously they are hoping is sending him to his doom. The film ends with Jamie in the clown Halloween costume that I mentioned before, with a pair of scissors, with which she promptly stabs her foster mum. Not fatally, but you get the idea. Dr. Loomis sees this and screams, "Ah!" As not unlike Friday the 13th Part 4, we are left wondering if we have a new killer. Maybe that was the idea, maybe it wasn't. We'd have to wait till Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers, to find out. It of course came along 1 year later, because as we've already touched upon in both the previous two horror episodes, the 80s were horror mad and they just churned them out one after the other. We see that Michael has been in a coma again for a year and has been cared for by a hermit who found him in a stream, which was luckily at the bottom of the mine shaft. He wakes up, of course, and kills the hermit. Jamie, in the meantime, is in a children's psych ward where she is now mute, but has a telepathic link from nowhere with her uncle. Loomis, of course, he's there and he realises this and figures that Michael is alive, a point which is proven when, of course, more dead people show up. Wanting to stop Michael once and for all, Loomis uses little Jamie as bait at the old Myers house. It all goes awry and more bodies drop until Loomis tranquilises Michael and batters him with a plank of wood, which is all going well until Loomis himself suffers a stroke and falls to the floor. Michael is locked up at the local police station where a strange man in black arrives, killing the police force. Seriously, who would work for the Haddonfield police force? It is probably one of the most dangerous jobs in the history of anything. But he basically kills all the police force and breaks Michael out of the pokey. We would have to wait 6 years before we got to Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers, to find out what in the hell was going on at the end of number 5. This film is interesting because there's actually two different versions. The originally intended cut was plagued by reshoots and outside interference, which resulted in massive edits and a whopping 43 minutes of footage being removed. This became famous because it never saw the light of day, and fans took to calling it the producer's cut, and it did the rounds for years and years and years on bootleg DVDs because, as I say, it was never officially released until, that is, it got its official release as part of a Halloween box set in 2014. The plot of the film ties in with the occult, which was first mentioned in Halloween 2 and the whole Sam Hain thing, and takes place 6 years after Halloween 5. We see Jamie, not played by Danielle Harris, who is being held by the man in black, who is the head of some weird sort of druid cult type thing. She gives birth and he takes a baby, although she later escapes with it, only to be chased, of course, by her crazy Uncle Michael. He eventually catches up to her and kills her, but she has already stashed the baby and pleaded for help via a telephone call to a radio station. A call that is heard conveniently by Dr. Loomis, who at that time is being visited by a former colleague from Smith's Grove, Dr. Wynne. Loomis comes out of retirement to finally try and put the demon of Michael Myers to rest. Back in Haddonfield, Tommy Doyle, who just so happens to be the adult form of the boy that Laurie Strode was babysitting in the first film, lives across from the old Myers house, in which we discover that relations of the Strodes are now living. Tommy has become obsessed by all things Michael, and as luck would have it, happens to find the baby, who he then decides to call Stephen. That's not really got any relevance to anything, but that's just what happens in the film. He also concludes that Michael has been inflicted with the Curse of Thorn, which is an ancient druid symbol that represents a demon who spreads sickness and destruction. There is then some randomness about blood sacrifices of the next of kin on Halloween and the Thorn constellation, none of which really makes sense, but then what do I know? And besides which, it's a horror film. Does it really need to make sense? We discover that the man in black is not Johnny Cash, but is actually Dr. Wynne, who is out to do some weird stuff with Michael's DNA. Michael, of course, is not happy about being exploited and played for a fool and starts offing members of the occult. The movie ends with Tommy and co escaping while Dr. Loomis goes back into Smith's Grove, saying that he's got something that he needs to do because he wants to try and finish things once and for all. We hear Loomis scream but never see why. It should be noted that this was actually Donald Pleasance's last ever movie appearance, and so Dr. Loomis would never appear again, not in the Donald Pleasance sense anyway. The ending to the fabled producer's cut is different and in my opinion better, but I'd urge you to track it down and see it for yourself rather than covering it here, which I know is a bit of a cop-out, but hey ho. In 1998 we were delivered Halloween H20, which of course takes place 20 years after the first two films. In the movie we are basically asked to ignore everything that happened in Halloweens 4 through 6. This film says none of that happened, Jamie never existed. In fact, not only did Jamie never exist, but Laurie is actually alive. She's basically faked her own death and is living a secret life as a headmistress at a school. She now goes by the name of Kerry Tate, and she also has a teenage son. Michael, being Michael, finds all of this out and tracks her down, slaughtering anyone who gets in his way. Everyone, that is, except for LL Cool J. You see, I've got this theory now that if you want to survive a film, stick with LL Cool J. Michael Myers doesn't kill him in this film. The massive killer sharks in Deep Blue Sea don't kill him in that film. The man is invincible when it comes to these types of films. If you want to survive, stick with LL Cool J. Anyway, nothing of any real note happens in the film until the end, where Laurie stabs Michael multiple times, pins him against a tree with a van, and then decapitates him. Job done. Or is it? Of course it isn't. It's because 4 years later, Rick Rosenthal would return with his first Halloween film since the second of the series. Not that this meant anything, of course, as Halloween Resurrection would star Busta Rhymes of all people, so it was never going to be very good. We begin with Laurie, who is in a psych ward after it turns out that it was a paramedic she had beheaded, not her brother. Seriously, don't ask. It's been 3 years, but Michael finds her and finally kills her, which you would imagine would allow him to retire and go and live in the country or something. A year later, however, an internet reality show star, the aforementioned Mr. Rhymes, holds a competition to see who can spend the night in the old Myers house. He arms all of the contestants with cameras as we try to bring the franchise into the new millennium. In that respect, it's a bit like Hellraiser Hellworld, except nowhere near as good. Rhymes has set up the house to be scarier than it actually is, and he actually dresses up like Michael and walks around the house hoping that he can scare the contestants, without realising, of course, that the real Michael Myers happens to be in the house and is offing people left and right. The final battle sees Buster Rhymes break out Kung Fu and beat Michael up before electrocuting him and burning him and the house to the ground. The final shot, however, is of Michael's body at the morgue where his eyes open, leaving a setup for the next inevitable sequel. A sequel that would never come. However, after a 5-year hiatus, we would get Rob Zombie joining the Halloween universe, as he would unleash his vision of the Halloween story in a remake of the original classic. Now, I've never been a fan of Rob Zombie's music. His first 2 movies are among my favourite ever horror movies. So I figured any man that could bring us The House of a Thousand Corpses and The Devil's Rejects would surely be able to do Halloween justice, despite my loathing of remakes and reboots in general. Zombie's version of Halloween sees Michael raised in a trashy household where his mum, played of course by Sherry Moon Zombie, is a stripper and her boyfriend, played by the immense William Forsythe, is an abusive drunk. Michael is a troubled goth-like type boy who murders a kid from school before killing his mum's boyfriend and ending up at Smith's Grove. There, of course, he meets Dr. Loomis, and we get to see just how disturbed Michael is, as both a boy and then as a hulking great brute of a man, played by Tyler Mane, who you may know as Sabretooth from the original X-Men franchise. The majority of this film is about what drives Michael to be the killer that he is, and it is only in the 3rd and final act that we get a rehash of the plot of the original film, and it's all sort of condensed down into about 20 minutes, half an hour. The difference this time around is that because we've spent so much of the film learning about Michael and what makes him tick, you actually side with him and you want him to kill Laurie Strode. It also doesn't help that the actress playing Laurie Strode is no Jamie Lee Curtis. In fact, this particular version of Laurie Strode is so obnoxious and irritating that you just cannot wait for her to get offed by her big brother. The film ends with Laurie supposedly killing her brother by smashing his skull in. 2 years later, unfortunately, Zombie would return with Halloween 2, which frankly was not very good. In fact, if I'm being completely honest, it was fairly crap. There's some stuff about the ghost of Michael's mum and a white horse, and as for the rest of it, I've done my best to blank it out of my memory for good. There are apparently plans for another movie next year, but to be honest, I'm not that keen because it's probably just going to be yet another reboot, which we really don't need. So, just looking at the original franchise, what do we know about Michael Myers? Well, for me, Michael is probably the most hardcore of all movie slashers, as not only did he begin his killing spree as a child, he is yet to actually die. Now, if you look at Freddy Krueger, for instance, he was murdered by the parents of Springwood and came back as a dream demon. Jason, whilst he was alive for the first couple of films, in 2 and 3, and obviously he wasn't around in 4, he eventually is killed and returns as a sort of ultimate zombie, if you will. Michael, to this point, has still never actually been killed. He has been shot, stabbed, blown up, electrocuted, but still he keeps ticking. Nothing can keep Michael Myers down. Also, when you compare him to Freddy and Jason, who just kill people left, right and centre, Michael is incredibly driven and fairly single-minded in his approach, as all he actually wants to do is be the last Myers standing. All the other victims that he picks off are just collateral damage. And those are the reasons why Michael Myers is my #1 horror movie icon. So what do you think? Do you agree? Disagree? Would you have those 3 at the top of the horror movie icon tree? And if so, would you have them in the order that I put them? Which of course is Thready third, Jason second, and Michael first. If you have any thoughts, theories, opinions, and you want to share them, just leave a comment in any of the little boxes. You know where they are. But before we get to the end of this show, though, it's time to continue with the tradition that we have now set, and that is another top 10 list. So this go around, we are going to look at the top 10 movie aliens. Again, all these top 10s are subjective and are just my opinion. You may agree, you may disagree. Again, hit me up with some comments and let me know what you think. So here it is. These are my top 10 movie aliens.
There's something curious about this broadcast.
Now we're starting, funnily enough, with another John Carpenter film, and it is the aliens from They Live. We don't know where they come from, we don't really know what their end game is, but we know that they're trying to control our minds with subliminal messages, and Roddy Piper is just not going to take it, goddammit. At number 9, we have the killer clowns from outer space. Now there's something freaky about clowns anyway. They're not right. They are by default a little weird. If you don't believe me, check out the clown in It. If that wasn't enough though, we have these killer clowns from outer space, and freaky looking clown aliens with killer balloon animals and candy floss, simply intent on murdering humans and creating carnage. At number 8 we have the alien from It. Again, we're not really sure why it's here, but we know that it can make itself look like anyone or anything. It could be your next door neighbour. It could be your pet cat. Hell, it might even be you. At number 7 we have the Predator, or Predators, who are basically nothing more than a race of bored hunters travelling the universe looking for victims for their games. They have high-tech suits which enable practical invisibility, and that makes them particularly dangerous unless you happen to have a spare Arnold Schwarzenegger lying around. At number 6 we have Klaatu from The Day the Earth Stood Still, and no, we're not talking about the Keanu Reeves remake. Klaatu basically comes to Earth to warn humanity that we are raising the ire of higher beings in space. What do? We kill him. At number 5 we have Alf. Now to be honest, Alf is a slight cheat to be fair, but is included as he was just so damn cool. Alf was from the planet Melmac and lived with the Tanner family, hiding from the alien task force. This ran for 4 seasons in the 80s and ended on a massive cliffhanger when it appeared that Alf had been captured by the alien task force and was going to be taken away and tortured. Fear not though, fans of the furry puppet. Well, Project Alf, which was released 6 years later, catches up with Alf, who in the end survives and becomes an ambassador to Earth. At number 4 we have Chewbacca. I had to go with somebody from Star Wars, and I figured why not go with the Sasquatch looking Wookiee. He's big, he's tall, he's hairy, and he looks like he could rip you in half without breaking a sweat. At number 3 we have the Xenomorph, also known as the alien from Aliens. They're big, they're bad, they're bony, and they have acid spit. At number 2 we have the Martians from Mars Attacks. They came with a message of peace. Then they sucker us in and try to slaughter us all. If only they'd have known about the power of Slim Whitman, they may have come better prepared, and we might be their underlings right now. All of which leads us to number 1 in this list, and it is none other than Howard the Duck. Now I know many of you are going to be face palming right now and shaking your heads in disbelief, but Howard came to Earth by way of a wayward experiment by our scientists. Not only does he save us and our entire planet from a massive alien threat that's coming via the same means that he got here, but he also gets to sleep with Leah Thompson in one of the most bizarre interspecies trysts you are ever likely to see committed to celluloid. And that is why Howard tops my list of the top 10 movie aliens. there you have it. That was another top 10 list, and this has been another episode of World of Stew. Of course, you can check me out in all the usual places. We have the Facebook page, World of Stew, and we also have the website, which is silentmovieman.wix.com/World of Stew. Now, as promised, we are going to end this episode with that Happy Halloween song from the Silver Shamrock TV ad. I'll catch you next time on episode 12. Until then, keep it geek.
Happy, happy Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. Happy, happy Halloween, Silver Shamrock. Happy, happy Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. Happy, happy Halloween, Silver Shamrock.
It's almost time, kids. The clock is ticking. Be in front of your TV sets for the Horror-thon. And remember the big giveaway at 9. Don't miss it. And don't forget to wear your masks. The clock is ticking. It's almost time.
Happy, happy Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. Happy, happy Halloween, Silver Shamrock. Happy, happy Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. Happy, happy Halloween, Silver Shamrock.